It's my pleasure to introduce today's guest, Daniel Juday. Daniel is the founder of Space Creator and is all about helping teams and leaders build more inclusive, meaningful spaces to work and grow. He works at the intersection of employee thriving, culture, and leadership, bringing this energy to Fortune 100 companies, scrappy startups, universities, nonprofits, and even the occasional cruise ship. How awesome. He's a keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and an executive coach with a passion for helping people connect and grow. And he does it all with an approachable and engaging style that we all know that you will love. So without further ado, Daniel, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Zaria. What a great introduction. I'm glad that was recorded. I'll just play that back every morning when I roll out of bed. Hey, everybody. My name's Daniel. It is so good to be with you. We've got a good sized group here. I'm so excited for that. And we've got a relatively short time. So I want to acknowledge a caveat up front in our conversation that we're not covering everything culture. We're not going to be able to poke our fingers into all of the good stuff that we could. I'm going to I guess, talk through a framework that I use as I do culture coaching with organizations. And for today's conversation, we're really just going to start with kind of the two big fundamental building blocks for healthy and thriving culture. And they relate to the words of the title. How do we activate our workforce and how do we accelerate our workforce? Maybe we think about it through the lens of how do we create better experiences for our team members and how do we create opportunities for better outcomes from our team members, right? We want to think about the internal experiences our teams are having and the external, the products, the services, the resources they provide to customers, consumers, clients, and stakeholders. And so we'll be keeping an eye on the internal and the external as we build out this little framework. This framework and the comments that we'll talk about today really come from work that I've done with maybe about 150 companies across the country to this point, working with teams around culture. How do we be and do team better, and some of the other things I've talked about. So while it's not meant to be a solution in a box or prescriptive in any way, I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. I'm not here to tell you or convince you I know something that you don't. It is meant to be really accurately descriptive. I really think this is how people show up on teams to do work together. There are some things that really help us thrive, and there are some things that really shut us down. And probably everyone on the call is going to be able to identify some of those moments as we walk through some of this content. So I'll talk for 30, 35 minutes, something like that. And then you're free to interrupt. If you've got a great question, please ask it. If you're thinking about it, probably somebody else is too. And so if you drop it in the chat, I've given the HR Like a Boss team not only permission, but encouragement to interrupt me. So if you got a question you want handled immediately, drop that in the chat. And if not, we'll circle back around to some open conversation and some Q&A at the end. So for now, I'm going to share my screen with you. And Bridget, if that share worked okay, will you give me a thumbs up?
It worked
awesome.
Great.
Awesome. All right. So you always got to do the double check on virtual just to make sure everything went through the portal. We're talking about activating and accelerating our workforce. And one of the words that I like to use when I talk about culture with organizations is the word better, because I really try hard not to come in with a prescription for this is who you should be, or this is how you should do your work, or this is what your product or your service should look like. I don't know the answers to any of those things. I'm not any of you. I don't know you. I don't know your teams. I don't know your customers and clients, but I understand people really well. And so I want to be as descriptively supported as possible so that we can collaboratively figure out where are some of our opportunities for getting better. So I really love playing with the word better because it's a word of process and progress, right? No matter how good we think our team is or how good our team really is, better is something that's always available to us. And we want to be careful about using the word better. I'll throw this out here maybe right at the beginning, that better doesn't always mean bigger, better, faster, or bigger, I guess it means better, bigger, faster, stronger, more. It's not a replacement for the word more. We get ourselves into a lot of trouble when we develop +1 cultures, right? You did a great job last week. This week, I need you to do just a little bit more and just a little bit more, just +1, just +1, just plus. That's hustle culture. That gets toxic really, really fast for people. So better doesn't always mean more. Sometimes better means slowing down. Sometimes better means better, more reflective and strategic thinking, less action. Sometimes for different team members on our team, better means more responsibility, more autonomy, more tasks, because they're in a career building prove it mode to themselves and their teams. Maybe for others, better means, hey, I've got high schoolers at home right now, and they're leaving the house soon, and I'm going to miss them, and I want fewer responsibilities and fewer tasks for the next year while I've got them at home for one last year before they leave. And we can flex and adapt and co-construct what better means to us. But you can see on the screen there are 3 P's that I think better indicates or moves us toward. But better people. How do we create better experiences for our team member? How do we help them grow? Not just competency upskilling, that's good, but holistic growth. I think professional development is often a symptom or a manifestation of personal growth, right? When I get better as a person, no matter what that looks like, I'm able to bring a better version of myself into my workplace. And so while we don't want to be like life coachy all the time as HR leaders, and that's not always a role that others want us to play, we can be asking the question, what does it look like to create better experiences for our people, to help them be better versions of who they want to be? Better processes, policies. These are the things that we write on paper that we hope happens, right? You know all about these things in your roles as HR leaders. We write processes and policies because we have a vision for what doing work together could look like. And so one of the questions we want to wrestle with is, what would better processes and policies look like? How do we shape those things more effectively, more productively, more inclusively, more meaningfully, so that when people see those things in our employee handbooks or on our websites, they see themselves and the best versions of themselves. And then better practices. Practices are when the policies and the processes happen in real time, right? We've got all kinds of practices that aren't written down anywhere as we think about how we be and do team, how we gather to do work. A great example of this that comes up a lot when I'm working with teams is the way we do meetings, right? Well, I shouldn't say no. Most companies that I've worked with don't have a specific process or policy for this is how you have a meeting. One person talks, one person gets to play devil's advocate and ask questions, as long as the person who gets to talk trusts the devil's advocate enough, if they've known each other long enough. 2 people get to nod along, and everybody else just be quiet and wait for the meeting to end. That's not written down on anybody's employee handbook. But that's often the way in practice meetings play out, right? The highest ranking person in the room does most of the talking. Their second in command does most of the question asking or pushing back. And a few sycophants nod along, and everybody else is just waiting for the meeting to be over so they can actually go do the work that they're held accountable to doing. So the practices are what being and doing team in real time looks like. And so we're thinking about those people, processes, practices as we think about how we be and do team better, right? What does it mean to have a culture where people can be activated, right, to their very, very best selves, and accelerated toward their highest growth potential? So here's the framework. We're going to keep it super simple today. We're just going to look at a Venn diagram, and I would argue that better experiences for people, better outcomes from people exists when we can marry 2 conditions in our workplaces, right? Where we're able to create this sort of thing and this sort of thing. And when those things touch, we have the opportunity for getting better. We have the opportunity for really honestly wrestling with what would better look like, sound like, feel like. We have the opportunity for being really transparent about what's not working and leaning out of it, about being really earnest and excited about what is working and leaning into more of it. So we're looking for the intersection of these 2 conditions. The first condition is what I call trust-filled space. We can think about it in lots of different kinds of ways. A trust-filled space is a space or an environment or a culture or a workplace where people feel seen and heard and trusted and valued and respected and believed. It's as simple as that, I think, in terms of the way that we use language in a description. Obviously, that can be really challenging. There are so many things going on in our workplaces today that make it really hard to feel seen. I mean, gosh, just think about the pace of change in our workplaces. Everything feels like it's changing. I mean, the world feels like it's changing, and workplaces are changing, and the markets are changing, and everything's in flux all the time. And so much of our energy and effort goes toward flexing and adapting and adopting to the changes of currents and trends and all of these things. And sometimes we feel lost in all of that. Like who I am isn't seen anymore. I walk into a room and I'm invisible or something like that. There are all kinds of conflicts in our workplaces due to the political nature of our country right now, due to what's happening across the world, due to the economy and socioeconomic class constructs, and all of these different things that bring 5 generations at work, all of these different things that bring conflict and tension and friction into our workplaces. It can be really hard to feel heard. It can be hard to create space to hear other people, because sometimes they say things that we disagree with. Sometimes they say things that we disagree with, not like, oh, I don't like that opinion, but like, oh, that fundamentally presses against my worldview. I mean, that is just really hard. There's a lot of hard labor in here. When we talk about building trust and this idea of people feeling seen and heard and trust and all this stuff, I tend to put it in this bucket called belonging, because I think this experience of belonging really speaks to the idea of people feeling seen and heard and valued. When all those things sort of get added into the equation, the sum total is, gosh, I really feel like I belong here. And it's picked up some, what would I say? It's picked up some negative baggage, I think, in the professional development marketplace, this word belonging. I think it's picked up this idea of like, well, people don't want to work anymore. They just want to belong. People don't want to like show up and do hard things anymore. They just want to, hold hands and tell everyone they're a magical rainbow unicorn skittle. And nobody, I put in my time and they don't. It just picked up it's picked up a lot of that kind of that vibe, when in fact the work of belonging is the hard work. I mean, when you think about how many different perspectives and opinions and backgrounds and worldviews and political stances and religious practices and socioeconomic classes and generational constructs walk into your workplace on any given day, and your job and the job of everyone around you to co-create is a space where everyone can feel seen and heard and valued. I mean, that's the hard work. That's not holding hands and telling people they're rainbow unicorns, right? That's down nitty and gritty and trying to figure out, how do we actually engage in conflict when there may not be any resolution? There's just engagement. How do I engage in a challenging conversation, a tough and tender conversation, when there's no solution or there's no fix, right? But there is seeing one another. There is hearing one another. There is respecting one another. How do I get better at? That's the work of belonging. It is so incredibly powerful when we feel like we have an experience of meaningful belonging. We'll talk about what that unlocks in a minute. One of the challenges about creating a space where people actually feel like they belong, I mean, I think for probably many of us on the call, we'd love to check the box and say, we did it. We have a culture where people feel like they belong, or at the very least, we agree. We think it's really important. You're preaching to the choir, bro. That's great. But part of the challenge is the way we construct what we mean when we say belonging, right? When we say belonging, we're talking about a felt experience at an individual level. That's really important, that we think about belonging as an individually felt experience. What I need to feel seen and heard and valued isn't necessarily what you need to feel seen and heard and valued, right? And I might feel seen and heard and valued by this little sub niche of our workforce, but not by this. And how do we transpose what's happening in one subculture to another? Belonging doesn't mean besties. We don't mean that you got to be best friends with everybody in your workplace, and that's not what we mean. Feeling seen and heard and valued, and offering that to other people, creating an environment where they get to experience that too, it really doesn't have anything to do with being friends, right? Friends is a different kind of emotional intimacy. We can see and hear and value one another, create an experience of belonging without having to sort of trigger the friend thing. So if you want to have friends at work, that's great, but that's not really what we're talking about. And often when we talk about belonging, we end up thinking about it as some kind of forced experience, as in, if we do X, Y, Z, people should feel like they belong. And if they don't, that's on them. The CEO sends out a memo about inclusion across the country, across the company. And we believe every team member's voice, matters. Your voice and your vote count with us. And, you're doing a great job. We care about you all, or something. And you hit send on that memo and it's like, there, we did it. Everyone belongs. We just told them that. Or when somebody questions that, you don't hear this very often, but you hear the subtext of this a lot. It's like, I'm sorry, we sign your paycheck every 2 weeks, don't you? Like you're on the team. You obviously belong. We pay you to be here. Like you're here. But those just aren't good hallmarks of belonging, right? Those are forced conditions when what we're really looking for an authentic experience of belonging is for that person to come to a moment of saying, oh my gosh, I actually feel seen. I really feel heard. And those conditions are different. At the bottom of the screen, you got a couple things that don't equal belonging. When we try to do this, we get off track in a couple kinds of ways. Sometimes we mistake presence for belonging. That's sort of like, we pay you to be here, don't you? You're obviously, don't we? You're obviously on the team. But presence is a really bad indicator of belonging, right? For you to be present on this call right now is a really low bar for belonging. It's even a really low bar for engagement, right? All you had to do was click a couple of links and you're present. Physically, to get into a room somewhere, presence is the bar of you dragged your bag of bones across the doorway. You made it. You're here, right? Now, maybe you're going to choose to have a really engaged experience or not, but presence isn't really an indicator of much, and far from belonging, right? So just because somebody's on the team or in the team doesn't mean they're having an experience of belonging, even if they're a well-paid member of the team, even if they're an engaged member of the team, even if they're a high-ranking member of the team. Simply because they're on the team doesn't mean they're having it. The other way we get twisted a little bit about belonging, as we try to sort of metric how are we doing at this, is mistaking assimilation for belonging. Now, I will admit assimilation is a pretty gross word, a pretty slimy word. We don't say assimilation in business context very often, do we? Well, I don't know, maybe you do. But maybe during your orientation, your onboarding for new employees, I bet the sentence like, in 5 to 10 days, we expect you to assimilate. You probably don't say that. But we do say things like culture fit. And we use the word fit a lot. And we coach people into, this is how we be and do team. And once people learn to play by the rules well enough of what it means to be on our team, whether that means who asks questions and who doesn't at meetings, who talks to who in the hallways, who sits where in the cafeteria, who takes off earlys on Fridays and who doesn't, who gets time with the VPs and who doesn't get FaceTime with them. Like all of these just practices of being and doing team. Just because somebody learns to play by those rules, whether they be written or unwritten, doesn't mean they're having an experience of belonging. It doesn't necessarily mean they feel seen, heard, valued. It just means they've figured out how to survive. And in fact, we might argue that those who assimilate really seamlessly might be having the least meaningful experience of belonging, because they are the people maybe who feel the most threat if they don't assimilate. Who I am or how I show up on this team is actually a danger to me thriving or surviving on this team. And so I'm going to seek to play so much by the rules that I fly under everybody's radar. I cannot stick out too much. And I've talked with probably hundreds of people for whom that perspective is true, right? We for a long time, we called it code switching, right? I like to call it, I mean, that's still a thing, obviously, but we might put it into a slightly larger, different bucket in the workforce called culture fit. Right? I will figure out how to play by the rules so I don't stick out. So it's really important that even if we think we agree with belonging, we get a handle on shared vocabulary and values around what does this actually mean to us and what doesn't it look like. And the last thing I want to say about belonging and trust before we move on, in terms of like why this activates our workforce, right? How does this bring our workforce to life in a new kind of way? If belonging is a felt experience at the individual level from a team member, it means it's not an input that we're giving, it's an outcome that they're delivering, right? It's an outcome that they're experiencing and getting to do something with. And as such, it delivers this new method or this new mode of showing up, this activated, engaged mode of showing up. Here's what's happening. If I'm on this team, and I am having a meaningful experience of belonging. Gosh, I feel so seen and heard and valued and trusted and respected, believe it. I really feel like I'm a part of what's happening here in a way that's meaningful to me and to my team. I feel valued by and valuable to my team. What's happening is there's this reciprocity, this reciprocal relationship that develops, that if I start to feel meaningfully like I really belong on this team, I also start to feel like this team really belongs to me. right? You think about all of the ways we talk team in the world, like sports teams, right? If you're on a basketball team, right, you belong on the team. You got the uniform. You show up to practices. You show up to games. But as you play and become a valuable member on that team belongs to you as much as it does to anybody else in terms of the outcomes of the team. When your team loses, you lose. When your team wins, you win, right? We move from this individualized, highly individualized experience. Obviously, you can still have individual experiences as a part of a team, but we open the door to this collective experience opportunity, that individual wins become shared wins and individual losses become shared losses. And shared wins become individual wins, and shared losses become individual losses. We develop an ownership mindset. We become equity owners. We have a real stake in the ROI of our team because we actually experience the outcome as owners, not just as kind of renters. We don't just show up and have our time rented. We belong here. I belong on this team and it belongs to me. And that's a really powerfully different paradigm than I just show up and they rent my time. I clock in. What do you want me to do now? Right? When I show up and feel meaningfully seen, heard, valued, trusted, respected, believed, I belong on this team. I see what's happening on the team and say, I co-own all of that too. I have an ROI in how everybody else is showing up, right? We just show up tremendously differently. We activate ourselves and our workforce really, really differently when we believe that we belong. I'm going to switch to the other side of the Venn diagram. Bridget, any questions or comments we should handle before we move to the other side?
Stephanie shared, and I think we can all understand this, how culture fit can also be code for groupthink. It can be code for a lot of ways we kind of suppress maybe other voices. And so it's really a slippery slope if not used properly. And then I just want to say how poignant what you kind of just touched on, that it's not only about belonging to a team, it's that it belongs to you as well. And you're taking accountability and ownership to that situation and not just letting it happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Appreciate you saying that, Bridget. Yeah. When employees authentically feel like they are co-creators of the culture, things really change. When the HR director or the CEO has to own culture, there's only so much you can do. You keep repainting the vision statement on the walls of the cafeteria or something. But when one or two people in an organization own the vision of who we can become and where we're headed and why we're headed there together and all that kind of stuff, there's only so much you can do. When the team owns co-creating that environment where everyone gets to thrive, be activated and accelerated toward their very highest experiences and potential, we just have tremendously different outcomes. And I appreciate the comment about the culture fit. This is often something that when working with teams, they can go back and audit some of their the ways that they talk about their company and their team and their culture, sometimes even audit their onboarding processes and handbooks and all that kind of stuff, because the language of culture fit for most of us has meant something positive. It means we want you to feel like you're a part of it and we want you to be a meaningful part of it and a productive part of it and whatever. But what it actually means in real time in practice is learn to play by our rules and don't stick out too much. We end up hiring for stasis. We keep saying we want to get better, and then we keep hiring people who fit exactly where we are right now instead of hiring for culture add, right? Don't hire for culture fit, hire for culture add. Who can help us get where we want to go? So that paradigm shift is incredibly powerful and something I've gotten to work through with lots of organizations. We're going to shift gears to the other side of our Venn diagram here. We're working on creating space where people that's full of trust, where people feel like they belong and feel activated as owners. I'm a co-creator of this culture. I co-own this. I have an equity stake in what happens here, right? And I could share a ton of stories about how that helps people show up differently and feel more activated, but ain't nobody got time for that today. It was a short call. The other thing to be thinking about, right? We're creating better experiences for our team, that trust-filled space. We also want to be thinking about creating better outcomes from our team, right? Our products get to get better. Our services get to get better. Our quality gets to get better. Our response times get to get faster. Our whatever whatever mode or modality of business, products or services you're in, we get to have high expectations and accountability for people to keep getting better. In fact, we'll look at this in a minute, but our culture ends up getting really toxic when we don't have high expectations and accountability structures for people. If we do that in a vacuum, that can get toxic too. But as we rest a growth-focused space on a trust-filled space says, I respect you. And a growth-focused space says, and I respect you so much that I don't think who you are today is the best version of yourself that you'll ever be able to achieve. I think you can keep getting better. That's how much I respect you, right? I mean, how we language that can shift and look and feel differently. But a growth-focused space isn't hustle culture. It's not one more. It's, I believe you can keep getting better. And I believe you can keep holding yourself accountable to higher and higher levels of excellence, to better, as we keep co-constructing what we believe better to mean, right? Not just plus one culture. The idea in creating a growth-focused space has to start with this idea that growth is never an accident, right? When I assume I won't have any growth opportunities, and we know what a growth opportunity is. It's a learning moment that feels hard. Growth, by definition, is, our brains, I guess I'll speak in metaphor for a minute, but our brains, metaphorically, we have this line, right? Where everything behind the line, I know that I know that I know that, right? I know that I know that I know 2 + 2 is 4. I don't feel twisted about it. I don't feel anxious about it. 2 + 2 is 4. It feels like the oxygen I breathe. I got no problem with that. And all of these things that I know, and I feel confident of my knowledge and competency and live behind this line. And growth happens when we move ourselves, our brains, our psyches, however you want to think about it, up to that line and take a step over it into a world called, I guess I don't know what I don't know. And that's a really big world. The world that lives behind the line of I know what I know, is a very small world. It's ours. I own mine and you own yours. And it's only relevant and relative to the life and experience that I have had. And yours is relevant to the life and experiences that you have had. And no critique or condescension. That's wonderful and rich and robust and lovely. But in the grand scheme of things, it's tiny. Mine is tiny and yours is tiny. I've got a very small zone of I know what I know what I know. And the zone of I don't know what I don't know is nearly infinite for every person. And it is a lot of work to move ourselves, our brains, to that line and then step across. It takes a tremendous amount of conviction and courage to live in a world called I don't know what I don't know, where learning opportunities and moments show up all of the time, where discomfort is a feeling, not danger, right? But discomfort is a feeling that we learn to live with. It's such a hackneyed phrase now, but like get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like everybody says that all the time, but that's what learners do. Right? They get comfortable learning the difference between danger and discomfort. Sometimes we're in danger and we need to pull back and protect our boundaries, and that's good. But a lot of times learning just makes us feel discomfort. It just makes us feel uncomfortable. It makes us feel vulnerable. I mean, think about the last time you were in a conversation with a grown-up and that you said something and that grown-up looked at you and said, "Oh, I didn't know that." Or like, "Whoa, really? I had no idea." Like, we just don't have very many oh moments anymore as grownups. You think about a 3 or a 4-year-old, their whole world is an oh moment, right? Because they don't have the baggage of I have to look put together and competent and intellectual or something all the time. They don't have any of that baggage. They're in learning mode as a part of their growth and development process. And most 3 and 4-year-olds fully embrace that. I'm in learning mode. And so they will ask 1,000 questions a day, and they will say things like, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that." Can you imagine what would shift in our workplace conversations and outputs around professional learning, growth, and development if our workforce was comfortable saying, "Oh, I didn't know that. Oh my gosh." I mean, that in and of itself would be transformational. We are so guarded and protected against discomfort. Our brains are geared for survival. And so as soon as our brains hit that line of I move from comfort to discomfort. I move from I know what I know to I don't know what I don't know. Our brains tell us actively, retreat, retreat. This is unsafe ground. Our brains are predictive engines, and they want to know what's next. And they don't know what's next across that line. They only know what's next behind it, because they know what they know, what they know, what they know. And it's a closed loop system. And so they tell us, pull back from learning opportunities, right? When something pops up, as grown-ups, our brains are like, don't you dare say, oh, I didn't know that, because that will open you up to who knows what. So don't say that. So we're just so closed and guarded. And one of the ways that we accelerate our workforce toward our very best, delivering our very best outcomes, is developing, creating, curating a culture where we're allowed to say things like, oh, I didn't know that, and a really helpful construct for teams to develop that kind of mindset. I mean, there's lots more specific work that we do with teams that we don't have time to go into today. But one of the ways we could think about that happening is just a simple kind of waterfall diagram of when we hit a learning moment. Maybe it's a tough conversation. Maybe it's a situation we're not sure what to do. Maybe it's somebody said something that we kind of don't think that we knew that we know, right? Whatever happens, we hit that thing, and we expect to hit those things every single day. We should wake up and get out of bed expecting, I'm going to learn today, right? That's a big part of this. But when we hit that moment, there's sort of a waterfall option. We get one of two options. Option one is we interpret that moment as an indictment. Right? Somebody else is telling us, or something, the world is telling us, that we're not enough. We're not smart enough. We're not good enough. We're not fast enough. We're not fill in the blank. We're not pretty enough. We're not tall enough. We're not, critically thinking enough. We're not emotional enough, or we're not direct enough. We're not, whatever, a million things. We're not enough. That is an accusation. You are not enough. And when we receive an accusation, nearly the only position available to us anymore in terms of our brains and the way it's geared for survival is defense. An accusation is an attack. And if somebody's attacking us, we go into defense mode because survival is paramount, right? If nothing else, our brain is like, you will survive. And whether it's a physical attack or a perceived attack on our intellectualism, or our intelligence, or our competencies, or our job experience, or whatever the thing is, whether it's a real or a perceived attack, the accusation feels as meaningful, and our brains go into defense mode. And defense modes mean shut down, pull back, like turn off, right? We talk about disengagement in the workforce. It's at like 75%, right, of the American workforce self-identifies as, I'm disengaged from my job. I just don't care that much. They don't not care about anything in their lives. 75% of working adults in America, they care about all the things they care about. They just don't care about the things they've been coached not to care about. And one of the ways that we coach ourselves not to care is by interpreting all of this learning around us as indictments, accusations, attacks against who we are. And we go into shutdown mode. It's just called apathy, right? We just turn off, because if we engage in it, we're engaging in an attack. Or we proactively choose to interpret these kinds of learning moments, these like, oof, uh-oh, aha moments, whatever they look like, as invitations. Oh yeah, I told myself I want to keep getting better, right? I believe in continued development. I want to keep learning, right? We have to have some conviction around that. And we can talk about like where that comes from, or what that looks like, or how we help team members develop that. But when we own that effectively, we can preemptively choose to interpret learning moments as invitations into our next. This is where my line is right now of I know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know. And this is a moment that I get to expand my line. I get to move it out a little bit. How exciting is that? Right? Ooh, uncomfortable, very stretchy. I worked with a colleague one time. I love the way she said this. She was like, learning moments are like jeans that just came out of the dryer. They are your favorite jeans. They will work for you on any given day. They're going to hit all the places you need them to hit, but they just got out of the dryer. And you're going to have to do a little work to make them your favorite pair of jeans again. You're going to have to do some squats and some stretches and some deep knee bends. And you're going to have to kind of stretch those jeans out a little bit to get them to serve you in a way that you want to be served by them. And learning moments feel the same kind of way. We got to get stretchy a little bit. We're pushing our line out a little bit of I know what I know into I didn't know that I didn't know that. Right? Oh, it's about turning uh-oh moments into aha moments. Right? And flipping that switch of this doesn't have to be an indictment against who I am. It can be an invitation, whether or not the person means it negatively. right? They get to mean whatever they mean. I get to interpret it however I want to interpret it. And I don't mean to be flippant about that. Some things are very hurtful and painful. And so you also get to draw protective boundaries for yourself. But I get to choose to interpret learning moments as invitations into my next. I authentically want to keep getting better. So when somebody pushes against my line of, I don't know what I don't know, right? I want to expand my line, right? To include that new learning, that new perspective, that new understanding. It doesn't mean I even have to agree with them, right? But I get to increase my comfort level of holding and seeing and wrestling with and poking around and exploring things that were once hidden from me and now are in plain sight. And now I get to think about it and work on it. And I still get to choose whether I believe it or not, or accept it or not, right? But I get better and better at staying in that place of that discomfort of growth. Really, really hard to do. Indictments stagnate us. Invitations accelerate us, right? So if we're thinking about activating and accelerating our workforce, we're looking to marry two environments together, right? Trust-filled space where we feel like we belong, where we become co-owners of the culture. It activates our highest levels of belonging and engagement and ownership, and a growth focused space where we accelerate to our highest levels of potential in whatever ways are meaningful for us, because we learn to accept hard things, the discomfort of hard things, as invitations from our now into our next. I'll close with this little diagram because this has been helpful for lots of folks. I'll just spend a couple of minutes and then we'll open it up to collective conversation for our group. But you can see I've got a couple lines here, and you can see the horizontal line is about trust and the vertical line is about high expectations, growth focused space, right? So the two conditions we just talked about. And you can plot cultures and subcultures when you see things showing up on your team. One of the problems in doing culture work is that we're so quick to say, oh, that's just toxic culture. Number one, that doesn't help us describe the condition, and so it doesn't help us prescribe a solution. And number two, conversations of toxic culture almost always come when you unwrap it a little bit. It's actually a conversation about a toxic person. We're actually having a conversation about Larry or Jennifer or whatever, right? That's what we actually mean, right? Because she's so toxic and he's so toxic and they've got this group around them now or whatever. And when we start talking about toxic people, we have just talked ourselves out of our ability to influence anything, because toxic is like a moral condition that we assign people as good or bad. You're toxic and you're not. You're bad and you're good. But we're not the moral police and we're not God. We didn't make good people good. We didn't make bad people bad. And as soon as we start just categorizing people as good and bad, we've talked ourselves out. We painted ourselves out of the equation to be able to coach anything differently. Culture is just coached behaviors, right? It's how we have learned to be in due team. And so toxic cultures are people's responses to cultures that aren't delivering high trust and high growth. And we can name those cultures and start to think about some of the work necessary to revive that part of our culture. So for instance, if we have team members who are working in a very low trust and a low growth expectation space, we expect to see them apathetic. It's not quote unquote good, but it's right. That is the appropriate response. If you are working in a space where you are not seen, heard, valued, trusted, respected, or believed, and no one expects you or it to get any better, what is there to care about? The appropriate response is apathy. We get really upset at apathetic people. What we ought to be doing is looking at the conditions of their work day or their work team or their work experience and be asking, how are they being coached into apathy? What are the conditions that are telling them there's not enough to care about here, right? When we've got really high expectations for growth, you got to keep getting better, but we don't see, hear, trust, respect, believe people, we often end up with anemic cultures, underpowered, burned out cultures, right? Because we're asking more and more and more and more of people in terms of output, but we're not delivering any new additional inputs like supports and scaffolds and sense of belonging and meaning and ownership. We're just asking more and more output without giving more and more inputs. And we end up with cultures of burnout. So we can look around our organizations and ask, where do we see people? I say the word anemic. I hope that doesn't offend anybody from the medical condition perspective, but I mean it in the sense of like feeling underpowered, right? It's like a weak culture. People show up at work and as soon as they clock in, they automatically just feel underwater and overwhelmed, right? There's just not enough support for them as people to create the kind of output that they know is expected. When we've got a really high trust space, but a really low growth space where people aren't expected to get any better, we have what I call affinity culture. It's kind of like belonging for belonging's sake, right? It's like you're on the team and somebody finally asks, well, what's the team for? And you're like, nothing, right? You don't join a team with, most people would not go to practice for a team over and over and over and over and over and eventually get told, oh, by the way, there's no games, there's no league, this isn't for anything. It's like, well, then wait, I thought that, right? That gets weird. It gets very sort of inwardly facing. You belong, but not for anything. Belonging wants an output. Community creates something, right? And so when we don't allow people to get better, deliver better experiences and outcomes through their belonging, their sense of ownership in the team, we stagnate their interest in doing so. And we develop this affinity culture, yes, we're here, but we don't really care about it because we've been caring about each other so long, we've forgotten why we're all here in the first place. Obviously, what we're shooting for is high growth, high trust, right? Where people feel seen and heard and trusted, respected, believed, and accountable to more and more growth in ways that are meaningful for them, right? Where they feel like they belong and they feel like they can be launched. And that's the framework that we call at Space Creator, that we call accelerant culture, right? Where we're working on those two conditions. And there are lots of ways to do that. Happy to talk through that with anybody. I want to pause here. There's a QR code on your screen. If you scan that with your phone, that just will take you. You can just register. I don't get your info or anything. It stays yours. But it'll drop you into a little online portal for this conversation where you can get this slide deck and a couple of just extra materials about this conversation if you want some further follow-up. So if you want the deck or any further follow-up, feel free to scan that QR code. Obviously, we talked about today kind of the strategy of what are we trying to do. There's a whole tactical conversation around how do we really do that. And I'm happy to talk about that, with you now, and of course, happy to wrap with you on that in further conversation. So I'm going to stop my screen share here and come back in. All right, I want to turn over ownership of this conversation from me to everybody else. I'm super happy to take questions, to have conversation. To hear some critique. Is there something that you want to push back on and lean into and wrestle with? Really anxious and looking forward to all of that. So I don't know, Zaria or Bridget, one of you, I think, are moderating this part, so I'll let you take over.
And I will say people are welcome to come off of mute. And I know there's been some conversation in the chat kind of about how being vulnerable is hard in the workplace. It's not, it doesn't always come naturally. I think we probably are told, you can't bring your authentic self sometimes. And that piece can be just so difficult.
Yeah. I'm looking through the comments here. Really appreciate
Daniel, while you do that, I just want to share a couple quick things. Number one, appreciate your time, your preparation, your expertise, and your talent. So well articulated and clear and concise, and some unique and different ways to look at culture and the impact that we could have. You brought me back almost 5 years and a little inside HR Like a Boss manuscript writing for those here that we have read the book, but you'll remember there's 5 sections of HR Like a Boss: Think Differently, Impact. And when I originally wrote the book, I only had 4. I had Think Different, Be Different, skipped over Be Better, Take Action, and Make an Impact. And a colleague of mine that I love and appreciate, Nikki DiCarlo, and I were talking about those 4 sections, and she said, John, that's not enough. You just can't be different. You have to be better in the context of advancing your professional skill and growing and developing. And your sentiments today, Daniel, just really solidified that. I don't know if you've read the book. I'm not putting you on the spot for that because it'd be terribly awkward one way or the other, but you hit right on the mid section of HR Like a Boss and being better. And I really appreciate you being additive in that and your perspective on it. I appreciate you very much.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, John. Yeah. Your colleague's perspective is so poignant because so often we are coached with good intent to be different, to be authentic, to be yourself, to bring your whole self to work, all this slew of stuff like that. But out of the context of keep getting better, and we get to, again, be thoughtful about what better means to us. But outside of all that, unique for unique's sake is not that great. Curious for curious sake is not that great. It can be overwhelming and intrusive. Innovative for innovative sake is just somebody who constantly messes with systems that are already working. I mean, unless we have better as a framework, it does get really messy. For teams that are actively working on what does better look like, sound like, feel like, and are getting to kind of reflectively and strategically think through that, oh my goodness, they get to apply that lens to everything from conflict engagement to collaborative efforts to decision making and how they have meetings and those systems and processes and all of this other stuff that brings so much additional clarity than just saying be authentic. That's a really messy message to send somebody. So I love that. Appreciate that.
And I think real quick to add, and I know there's some comments, but that better, you mentioned that before, and what that means. Everybody's definition is maybe not necessarily more is better. Sometimes less is better. Simplify, simplify, simplify. The famous Thoreau.
You know what, John, you're going in and out.
But I think, and just, oh, sorry.
Yeah. I appreciate that, John. We lost some of your connection there at the end, but your previous comment we got. I'm looking at Kevin. Kevin, I appreciate you putting this in the chat box here. It says, I'm struggling with I hope you don't mind me reading this since you posted it in there, but struggling with the negative perception or impression of hustle culture. Give this quote: makes sense to my authentic self. Is this somehow interpreted negatively? I appreciate you. I think there are lots of ways that hustle is something we ought to be figuring out. What does hustle look like and how do we coach it to our teams? Hustle's great. I don't have any problem with hustle. Hustle culture as a modality has come to mean a place where who you are and what you deliver by definition is never enough, right? Where you always have to deliver one more of something, and your value to the team is not in who you are, it's in your ability to produce one more. Not even your value in what you produce for the team, but in your capacity to be able to produce one more. So hustle culture is this never-ending quest for how do I squeeze one more drop out of this thing, one more hour out of my day, one more task off my list. And it's just a place where people don't thrive. Short term, we have the perception that they thrive. Long term, it's not. If we're not more holistically defining what better actually means for us, gaining clarity on vision and mission and objectives and how we achieve those things and how we keep setting the next version of them and holding ourselves accountable to that, I think we can hustle in all that. By hustle culture, I mean that specific kind of modality that can be really, really damaging to folks. Anything you want to jump in back into that with, Kevin? Happy for you to come off mute if you want to. Oh, I see. You just posted in the chat. Okay, awesome. Oh, Alan, appreciate that. Thank you. Without wellness, we had a group in this past week that really talked about self-care. Yeah, Mindy, thank you for saying that about self-care in the chat. If you didn't see Mindy's comment, you should read it. That's a huge part of this. And again, self-care has, there's all kinds of baggage in the conversational marketplace about what self-care is. It's not people randomly taking off days of work without telling their team because they decided, at 7:30 in the morning it's a self-care day. That's not self-care, that's selfishness because they left their team high and dry. But thoughtful and reflective self-care is so important. And we get really mixed messages in the workplace of bring your whole self to work, but no, not that part of you. It's like, yeah, we are emotional and psychological and experiential and all of these things that we don't necessarily get to unlock and unleash fully in the workplace, but we bring with us. And what do we do with all of that stuff? And self-care is complicated and looks different for everybody. I think it's definitely a part of the culture conversation. I would probably put self-care in one of the quadrants of work that we build out in the Accelerant Culture Framework in in what we call the continuing education quadrant, anything that's about resourcing and scaffolding for growth and development. And that includes ourselves too. And we get to treat that really holistically, and it gets to look different. I'm not saying that everybody has to do naked goat yoga or something. You don't have to if you don't want to. I don't. But figuring out what is restorative to you, and making a strategic practice of that is such a big part of developing a healthy workplace, and culture. So anything else? Other questions? Happy for folks to come off mute. And goats are always naked, I guess, Stephen. So that's a good point. Oh yeah, Jennifer, we are emotional beings that sometimes think. Oh, that's good. I was doing some writing this morning about the emotions that we carry in our backpacks, and how whether or not we acknowledge that we carry them with us from past experiences, they're in our backpacks, and we unzip our backpacks every time we walk into work, and we dump that stuff out in our cubicle and in our meetings and in our conversations with colleagues and clients and customers, and they experience our backpacks and all the emotions therein, whether we acknowledge they're there or not. And so, in having a conversation about emotions, we don't have to say, oh, I should be so much more emotional. It's just an acknowledgement that as a human, I have emotions and they do something to me. Yeah, that's really, really good. What else? Anybody else want to jump in here?
I'll give you a shot for just a second here. As you can see, I'm driving, and I hope you can hear me because I'm in the deep recesses of southern New Jersey where you don't get much signal. My favorite expression in human resources, it depends. Everything, your content's fabulous, but I always fall back to, it depends on the people you work with, the culture that they want to engender, things of that nature. What do you say to people who you get stuck in that area? It depends. I mean, there's just times you can't rescue it, you can't be part of it, but you're also trapped. You can't move on because the job market may be tight, etc. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. I mean, my initial thought is probably there's a depth of conversation necessary there that, a 2-minute response isn't conducive to. I think experiences are always up for grabs. We always have the opportunity to create new experiences with and for people. And if culture is the experiences that we have as we be and do team together, I think we always have the opportunity to create new experiences. There are a lot of people who have been, I really believe culture is coached behavior. We aren't born knowing what it means to be and do team in a corporate setting. We learn those things. So I really think if culture's coached behavior, it can become uncoached. We can coach new behaviors. No, this is how we be team. These are the experiences that matter to us, and yours matter to us. This is how we do team. This is how we make decisions. This is how we have meetings. This is how we talk to one another, whatever. I really think most of the companies that I work with are leaving a lot on the table as they think about their employees that are maybe even most challenging, because they still are in this mindset of some have chosen to be good employees and some have chosen to be bad employees. No, all employees are signaling appropriately to us, this is the experience I'm having. And they show up apathetic, or they show up anemic, or they show up with affinity, or they show up accelerated. Like one of those 4 things is happening for them. And it's a signal of the experience we're having. I also, though, Keith, take your point. Not everything's happening in a vacuum, right? There could be a place, a time and a place where realignment is the best choice for people, right? For the team and for that individual person. Like, hey, this is how we are going to be and do team. It's this accelerant culture with trust and expectation. And somebody could say, like, I'm just not into it. That's not what I want. I want to be apathetic about my work. I want to be disengaged. I'm in a season of life where I need a clock in, clock out. I don't want to think about anything. I don't want to connect with anybody. I don't want, like, that's fine. People get to make those decisions. And realignment, like, okay, that doesn't mean you're a bad guy. Just doesn't mean that you're going to help get us where we want to go. You're not going to be a culture ad here. So let us help you find a team where you're going to get to have the experiences you want to have. And so thinking about realignment. Now, when that works best is when that person chooses it too, and the team can collectively help that person transition. in a tough job market, if the person's like, it's not worth leaving because I don't have another option, so I'll just stick around and just choose to be dead weight or something, that is really challenging. And so I think there are some ways that we can think about showing up, coaching the kind of culture that we want to coach for our team, and not accepting a lower version of that, while also making space for somebody who is basically in a holding pattern. I think that's a real thing sometimes, and we can figure that out. And lots of teams do, as you know. But it's a good question. Again, obviously nobody thought I was going to solve anything in an hour for you anyway, so I haven't disappointed anyone, I assume, because you didn't think I was going to solve anything anyways. But there's 100 ways, 1,000 ways we could complicate this with scenarios and specific situations. And that's the work of that's my work. That's the work of getting in rooms with teams, managers, leaders, and working through some of this stuff. So would love to do that with anyone who's interested. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking at the time. I want to honor everybody. So I'm going to pass this back to Zaria, who opened us, so that she can close us down officially. If you want me, get a hold of me, spacecreator.com. Would love to chat with you, but it's just been a real honor to be with you. John, thanks for creating space for me and inviting me in to be with you all today. And thanks to everybody who got on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I feel like this is one of those sessions that we really could go for another hour. But as we are respectful to everyone's time, I went ahead and put in the certification for the Sherman HRCI credit in the chat. So please download that for your records. And of course, Daniel, a huge thank you to you for your insights, and to everyone in the room for your energy and your engagement throughout this whole session. Like, this has been truly amazing and great, and I look forward to connect. This is, however, our last session until August 6th. However, on August 6th, we have Tracy Graff presenting Drive Positive Workplace Outcomes by Adapting Your Communication Style. So in the meantime, let's follow the HR Like a Boss page if you haven't already. Connect with John, Willery, us on LinkedIn, the HR Like a Boss community. We are more than happy to have you. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to message me anytime at zaria@willery.com. So everyone, once again, thank you very much. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you all for being here. Until next time.